Good morning. We will now begin the webinar. Today is September 24th, 2021, and the time is 10:02 a.m. This webinar is being live-casted and recorded and will be available publicly on the MTA YouTube channel and the Central Business District Tolling Program project website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. Today's webinar will begin with opening remarks, followed by a presentation on the Central Business District Tolling Program, and then public comments. Only those who signed up to speak in advance will be able to give public comments. If you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. If you did not sign up to speak at today's webinar, you may sign up to speak at an upcoming webinar. To do so, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or call the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. CART captioning and American Sign Language interpreters are available at today's webinar. We will now start with opening remarks from Dr. Allison Desereño, MTA's Deputy Chief Operating Officer.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited to be engaging in public outreach for this historic project, and we thank you for taking the time to learn more and share with us your thoughts and comments. Joining me today are colleagues from New York State Department of Transportation and New York City Department of Transportation, as well as from the Federal Highway Administration, the lead federal agency for this project. We also have several individuals from our respective staffs here with us to listen to what you have to say. Your comments will be indexed and considered as part of the environmental assessment process. With that, let's jump right in as there's a lot to cover. Our agenda for today is to review the proposed program, the project purpose and need, discuss the project alternatives, provide an overview of the environmental assessment, and discuss and describe environmental justice considerations. We'll take a few moments to talk about the potential project effects and benefits, and then have a public comment session. So how did we get here? There's been a decade of congestion. Congestion in New York City has consistently ranked among the worst in the United States. Local bus speeds in Manhattan are on average 7% slower than citywide speeds. Between 2010 and 2018, travel speeds decreased by 23% in Manhattan's Central Business District, or CBD. And during that same period, multiple studies and panels explored how best to address congestion, including the 2008 New York City Traffic Congestion Mitigation Commission and the 2018 Fix New York City Advisory Panel. Many of them came back with the same concept of congestion pricing. There is also a need for sustainable funding source for transit. Prior to the pandemic, nearly 75% of trips into the Manhattan Central Business District were made using transit. 95% of trips to the Manhattan Central Business District by low-income populations are made using transit. MTA's subway system is over 100 years old and must be repaired and modernized to meet the region's needs. And funding transit modernization would improve service and attract commuters back to the system, further reducing congestion. In April 2019, the New York State Legislature passed the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. If approved by the Federal Highway Administration, this act would entail vehicles entering or remaining in the Manhattan Central Business District be tolled. Net revenues would be used for public transportation capital projects, with 80% devoted to New York City Transit, 10% to the Long Island Railroad, and 10% to Metro North. The toll rates will be determined by the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, or TBTA Board, informed by recommendations of the Traffic Mobility Review Board and after a public hearing. There are mandatory post-implementation reporting and evaluation requirements. To make sure everyone understands the area about which we're speaking, Central Business District tolling program boundary is south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Tolls would not apply to vehicles that are solely using the FDR Drive, Route 9A West Side Highway, including connections to the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, or the Battery Park Underpass connecting the FDR Drive and Route 9A. Federal Highway Administration will serve as the federal lead agency for environmental review. They're responsible for reviewing all of our analyses to confirm that they are complete, and they will also issue the environmental findings for the project. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority and its affiliate, the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, the New York State Department of Transportation, and the New York City Department of Transportation are serving as project sponsors. With respect to the project purpose and need, the project purpose is to reduce traffic congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District in a manner that will generate revenue for future transportation improvements, pursuant to acceptance into the FHWA's Value Pricing Pilot Program, or VPPP. The project would address the following needs: reduce vehicle congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District, and create a new local recurring funding source for MTA's capital projects. The following objectives further refine the project purpose. It would reduce daily vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, within the Manhattan Central Business District, reduce the number of vehicles entering the Manhattan Central Business District each day, create a funding source for capital improvements and generate sufficient annual net revenue to fund $15 billion for capital projects for the MTA capital program, and establish a tolling program consistent with the purposes underlying the New York State legislation entitled the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. So how is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and the project linked? NEPA requires federal agencies to assess and consider the environmental effects of their proposed actions prior to making a decision. The project would be implemented through the Federal Highway Administration's VPPP. As a federal program, that VPPP, or Value Pricing Pilot Program, is subject to NEPA. Federal Highway Administration is the lead agency and has determined that an environmental assessment with extensive outreach is the appropriate level of environmental documentation for this project. There are two project alternatives. There's the no action. There would be no Central Business District tolling program, no comprehensive plan to reduce congestion in the Central Business District, and no identified transit capital revenue stream. And there is the build or act alternative, where we would build a Central Business District tolling program. There would be new tolling infrastructure and toll system equipment, implementation of a tolling program, which would have multiple scenarios in the environmental assessment to assess and identify the range of effects, positive or negative. And there would be creation of a new revenue stream for investment in subways, buses, and rail. A little more detail on the proposed Central Business District tolling program alternative. As noted earlier, tolls would be charged for vehicles entering Manhattan south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Passenger vehicles would be charged once per day, and there are exemptions required by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act for qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities, qualifying authorized emergency vehicles. Central Business District residents with gross adjusted incomes below $60,000 would be eligible for a tax credit. And there would be a Traffic Mobility Review Board that would be tasked with recommending to the TBTA board the toll structure, including but not limited to a plan for credits, discounts, and/or exemptions. Recommendations will be informed by a traffic study and must take into account multiple criteria, including the ability to generate revenue required, the impact on traffic patterns and volumes, public safety, air quality, among others. With respect to the toll, the environmental assessment is going to assess a range of scenarios and will be informed by robust public outreach. Studying multiple scenarios ensures that we understand the full range of potential environmental effects, including but not limited to congestion reduction, that different toll rates may cause. Toll rates will differ in each scenario depending upon the time of day, how someone pays, and the inclusion and extent of any credits, discounts, and/or exemptions beyond the two mandated by the enabling state legislation. Importantly, all else being equal, the more credits, discounts, and/or exemptions that are given, the higher the toll must be in order to meet the project's purpose, needs, and objectives. The modeling is not complete, and a final determination of the toll rates will not be made in the environmental assessment. Indeed, the toll rates, as noted previously, will ultimately be set by a vote of the TBTA board after the environmental review process and after the Traffic Mobility Review Board makes its recommendations. So importantly, these numbers I am about to share are for informational purposes and subject to change. With that said, to give you at least a sense of the range of potential toll rates, we anticipate that the Easy Pass peak period toll for automobiles will range from roughly $9 on the lower end to $23 on the higher end if many credits, exemptions, and/or discounts are provided. The range of potential toll rates for automobiles using tolls by mail would be higher, roughly $14 to $35 for the peak period, again, depending upon scenario. Off-peak and overnight toll ranges may be lower, and tolls for trucks and other vehicle types would have different ranges. With respect to the study areas, the broad study area for the environmental assessment includes a region of 28 counties throughout New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. There will also be more refined local study areas, including the Central Business District as defined by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. In other words, 60th Street and Inclusive and South, with those other areas excluded as we described earlier. And neighborhoods near the Central Business District boundary where the project could have social, economic, or environmental effects. In terms of the key topics of the environmental assessment, this is not the full list, but we wanted to at least give you some sense of the kinds of things we'll be studying. Among them, as you can see, regional transportation, which is obvious. We'll be looking at highways and local intersections, commuter rail, subways, and buses, parking and pedestrian and bicyclists. We'll also be looking at social and economic considerations and conditions. We'll be looking at the visual resources, air quality, noise, and environmental justice, among others. Environmental justice is an important consideration for the project. Given that over 51% of the population within our study area lives in environmental justice communities, we're going to spend some time walking you through the federal requirements to address environmental justice and some of the tools we'll be using to engage with environmental justice communities. The term environmental justice refers collectively to minority and low-income populations within a project study area. In 1994, President Clinton issued Executive Order 12898, which requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their actions on environmental justice communities. In subsequent years, the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration have issued their own orders on environmental justice. Our environmental assessment must comply with all of these orders. The orders provide that Federal Highway Administration take the appropriate and necessary steps to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse effects of federal projects on the health or environment of minority and low-income populations to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law. This slide shows the steps we'll be using in developing our environmental justice analysis. It is based on guidance developed by Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. As you can see, we begin by identifying minority and low income or environmental justice populations and environmental justice communities. We engage in outreach with those communities, as you can see by the little picture on the right. We then determine whether the project would result in adverse effects on environmental justice populations or communities. We consider mitigations for those adverse effects of the project, as well as potentially offsetting benefits to the affected environmental justice populations. Again, there's outreach and engagement during that process. If the effects remain adverse after mitigation, we identify disproportionately high and adverse effects. If there are no disproportionately high and adverse effects, the evaluation is complete. If there are disproportionately high and adverse effects, we evaluate further mitigations or alternatives to avoid or reduce those effects. The Federal Highway Administration Environmental Justice Order provides specific definitions for minority and low-income populations. As you can see here, minority is defined by U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration as a person who identifies as Black, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Asian American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, or individuals identified as some other race by the U.S. Census. Low income is defined by United States Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration as a person whose household income is at or below the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines. For a family of 4, the 2018 U.S. Census Bureau poverty threshold was $25,750 for the study area. Based on the definitions in the previous slide, we have identified the environmental justice populations in our 28 county study area. As noted earlier, and as you can see in this table, over 51% of our study area population is considered minority, and over 13% is considered low income. This map shows the distribution of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. The map shows large concentrations of environmental justice populations in New York City and the immediately surrounding suburbs. There are also large concentrations of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. Our public outreach will engage with these communities as much as possible. One way we'll be engaging with the communities is through the creation of an environmental justice technical advisory group. This is a group of technical experts who have knowledge of environmental justice considerations and can share concerns drawn from throughout the study area. The group is comprised of community leaders, advocacy group representatives, and industry group representatives with specific interest in environmental justice considerations. Their purpose will be to identify concerns and mitigation if needed, and help to ensure information is circulated as widely as possible to the larger communities. The technical advisory group will be by invitation only, and we anticipate the first meeting convening in early October of 2021. Potential participants will be contacted in advance. We will also be creating an environmental justice stakeholder working group. This is a group of interested members of the communities throughout the study area who would also like to participate beyond submitting comments or participating in the webinars. This group will be comprised of interested members of the community, and the purpose is to share concerns and request discussion on particular issues as appropriate. To suggest yourself or someone else, you may visit our website, or you may complete a form, or you can contact us by phone at 646-252-7440. We anticipate that the first meeting of this group will be convened in early November of 2021. And again, once we have all the names and contact information, participants will be contacted in advance. We're going to review some of the potential effects of the project. Importantly, these effects are dependent upon scenario. The next slide will highlight some of the potential benefits, but I'll take a few moments to talk through the bullets here. We anticipate that there may be effects where there would be new tolling infrastructure and equipment, that there might be changes in traffic in neighborhoods near the Manhattan Central Business District, and that there might be traffic that diverts around the Manhattan Central Business District to avoid tolls. Again, dependent upon scenario. Near the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, we anticipate some traffic diversions on the highway system that could result in more than a nominal increase in traffic. Preliminary analysis suggests this change in traffic would not occur on local roadways and would not adversely impact air quality or noise in the neighborhoods where the highways are located. However, we will be looking more closely at the neighborhoods adjacent to both sides of these tunnels. Some drivers currently travel through Manhattan, although their destination is elsewhere. For example, you may travel from New Jersey to Brooklyn or the Bronx by going through Manhattan. Preliminary modeling indicates that some of these drivers may change their routes and traffic may increase in certain locations depending upon scenario. We will be looking more closely at the extent of those increases in parts of Staten Island, Brooklyn, Upper Manhattan, and the Bronx, and whether they could result in notable changes in traffic, air quality, or noise. Preliminary analysis also indicates that new transit passengers who may take transit rather than drive will be spread throughout the transit system and will not overcrowd any particular route or line. Based on preliminary analysis, the shift to transit would not notably change access to transit services, or pedestrian circulation near transit stations and hubs. In terms of tolls on low-income and minority populations coming to the Central Business District from throughout the region, a direct effect of the project on residents of the Manhattan Central Business District who are part of an environmental justice population is that they will be charged a toll to drive into the Central Business District. However, the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act provides a tax credit for those individuals whose primary residence is within the Central Business District and whose New York adjusted gross income is less than $60,000 per year. Preliminary analysis has found that fewer than 1% of the Manhattan Central Business District's commuters are low-income individuals who drive, but nonetheless, we are assessing the economic effects of the additional costs for these customers. Tolls on the taxi or for hire vehicle industry, which has a high proportion of workers who identify as minority, as defined by United States Department of Transportation guidance, are also being looked at. Industry data shows that a high percentage of taxi or for hire vehicle drivers identify as belonging to a minority population. Once there is a new toll for entering the Manhattan Central Business District, some passengers may no longer choose to use taxis and for hire vehicles. We will examine the effect of the project on the taxi or for hire vehicle industry and the resultant effect on minority drivers. With respect to potential project benefits, if approved, we anticipate the project would reduce vehicular traffic in and near the Manhattan Central Business District. Overall, and depending upon scenario, our models predict a 15 to 20% reduction in traffic volumes that would enter the Manhattan Central Business District each day. As a result, we would see improvements in air quality and traffic noise as there would be fewer vehicles. We also anticipate improvements in travel times within the Manhattan Central Business District, again, as there would be less congestion. And of course, the project would provide additional funds for subways, trains, and buses, funding the MTA Capital Program, which includes many projects to improve and expand subway, bus, and commuter rail service. This would benefit MTA's transit commuters, including environmental justice populations. I want to take just a moment to discuss or describe the anticipated NEPA schedule. We've already begun our outreach. That's what we're doing here today. And we anticipate that this outreach will continue through January of 2022, as we also prepare the NEPA environmental assessment. Between February 2022 and May 2022, there will be review with Federal Highway Administration of the document itself. And at the end of that period, the environmental assessment will be made available for public comment. Once the document is made available for public comment, there will be a public review period and a new comment period. That period will also include additional outreach related to toll rate ranges. Between that June 2022 date and December 2022, the work will be done to incorporate all of that information to make sure that the final outreach is done, and ultimately to have Federal Highway Administration make an environmental determination. If approved by Federal Highway Administration, future outreach and public hearings will be held as part of the Implementation and Traffic Mobility Review Board process during 2023. Here is the list of all the public outreach webinars we are holding. As had been noted in the distribution materials prior, you may attend any one of these or all of these as you would like. We also have the 3 environmental justice outreach meetings, webinars. Those will be occurring on October 7th, 12th, and 13th with slightly different focus areas. But again, as with the public outreach meetings, residents may attend any one of the webinars they would like to. In terms of our stakeholder working group meetings, we expect the first one in early November, the second one in late November, and then we expect a third one in June of 2022 once the environmental assessment has been released for public review. Thank you.
We will now move to the public comment portion of today's webinar. We encourage anyone joining via Zoom or live stream to take a short survey using the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. We are gathering public comments today to inform the environmental review process. Comments will be reflected in the environmental assessment once it is made public. Rather than responding to comments as they are given, we will do our best to address specific questions whenever possible in the Q&A chat function. However, please understand that at this phase of the process, your question may be one that cannot be answered meaningfully until completion of the modeling and analysis. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. Please note that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. We ask that speakers keep their remarks to the 2-minute time frame out of respect for all other speakers. We will be calling speakers who live in the geographic area that is the focus of today's webinar first in the order they signed up, but everyone who signed up will be called to speak today. If you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. When you are called on to speak, there will be a brief transition on your screen. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before beginning your remarks. You will not be able to unmute or enable your camera until it is your turn to speak. Please remain patient until then. In the event you miss your name being called, we'll call the list one more time after all speakers in attendance have been called a first time. As a reminder, this webinar is being live casted and recorded and will be available publicly on our YouTube channel and our project website. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded.
We will now begin the public comment portion of today's webinar. Our first speaker is Representative Josh Gottheimer, followed by Robert Green.
Hello, can you see me?
Good morning, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning, I'm Congressman Josh Gottheimer. I'm very proud to represent New Jersey's 5th Congressional District, and I'm here today to fight back against New York's proposed congestion tax. Under this proposed congestion tax, when New Jersey commuters drive across the GW Bridge and into Midtown, they'll get whacked. Not only with the GWB $16 a day toll, which is ridiculous, but now an additional $15 congestion tax when they drive south of 60th Street. That's up to $31 a day or more in total for a nurse, just to drive to work in New York City or to see family, at a time when we all need a comeback. Even more concerning, unlike the shared Port Authority resources from the tolls, which help both our states, every nickel of this new congestion tax will go solely to the MTA. Not a cent will be shared with the PATH or New Jersey Transit to help New Jersey. That's unacceptable. Levying a new regressive tax on Jersey commuters who already pay a fortune to get into the city, and millions in New York State taxes, plus all of the resources here in Washington that we sent to New York City during the COVID crisis, that's no way to make this region stronger. Instead, this is simply an attempt to mooch off of New Jersey. Also, as the MTA chief financial officer said in June, the MTA does not need the congestion pricing proceeds right now. I strongly urge you to withdraw this proposal and work together with us toward a more cooperative, better solution for everyone. When we work together, New Jersey and New York are a tough combination to beat. But right now, for my district and for all New Jersey commuters and all those who need to visit family in New York, I have no other choice but to fight back. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Robert Green, followed by Richard Urilli.
Hi, my name is Robert Green, and I live in the CBD. If you look up CBD in Google, you find nothing but weed shops. That's because there is no such thing as the central business district, a place where 1.3 million people live, as is true below 60th Street on the island of Manhattan, is anything but. It's a central living district, and it should be described as such. I know that the 3 generations of my family that live here, retired, working, and in school, deserve safe walking, safe biking, and clean air, just like wherever you are coming from to drive into the CLD. That's right, the CLD, remember that. In fact, most people who drive here have yards or areas for their kids to play in by their house. Here, in the CLD, the city is our backyard, and yet people in cars and trucks think that they should just be able to stomp all over our yard and pay nothing for the privilege. Please. Cars should be seen as guests in the CLD, and their use and abuse must be lessened. Pass congestion pricing with no exemptions as soon as you can so that me, my kids, and my parents, and the 1.29997 million other people can all walk, bike, and breathe easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Richard Urilli, followed by Guillermo Cancio.
Hello, my name is Richard Urilli. I live in Jersey City, and before the pandemic, I commuted daily into Manhattan. While I do own a car, I primarily get around the region by walking, biking, and riding the PATH and subway. I'm here today to express my unequivocal support for the Central Business District tolling program. In reality, New York City and the entire metro area need to do much more than implement congestion pricing to make the region more livable for all of its residents. But the program is an important step, and the city, state, and federal government should do everything in their power to expedite its launch. I know a number of people are here to oppose congestion pricing. I want to urge them, including Representative Gottheimer, to seriously consider the benefits of reduced traffic for drivers. Reduced traffic would decrease the amount of time you spend in the car when you do have to drive in and out of the city. If you're a commuter, that means more time to do what you want to do at work or at home. If you drive around to different work sites in Midtown and Lower Manhattan, the time saved means more jobs and more income that would more than offset the additional toll. The benefits for everyone are clear, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Guillermo Cancio, followed by Corey Hannigan.
Hello? Can
Yes,
you guys
hi.
see me? Hi.
Yes, we can.
Thank you for hosting this meeting and allowing the public to provide comments. I encourage the MTA and all other institutional stakeholders across this tri-state metropolitan region, including the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, to collaborate in decision-making for all, not just their artificially siloed constituencies. I oppose congestion pricing as a proposal and ultimately adopted by the New York legislature ever since I was a resident in Brooklyn within Assemblyman Carroll's district. Unfortunately, the New York legislature decided a new fee, a euphemism for tax, without determining how to spend it, was the best idea to serve the public. What kind of governance style is it to levy a tax without direction how to implement the tax? No, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a banana republic. It's New York State, where accountability of government is limited at best or non-existent at worst. Proponents of congestion taxes have now had 2 years to build their case for congestion pricing. The tax has to be levied by law. Now we are condescended to that it's for our own good because of all the evaluation undertaken. It is interesting that the city and state of New York claim to care about these issues, but only see additional taxes as a means of achieving their aspirations, something they have been unwilling or incapable of managing for the better part of forever. Legislators and bureaucrats have chosen to ignore effective means of reducing congestion without extracting funds from users. It goes without saying, the MTA could spend less, spend its current budget more efficiently, and use other means of congestion reduction, like using existing tolling infrastructure and implementing two-way tolling on existing infrastructure, expanding traffic calming measures, and road diets and road pedestrianizing. As to promoting equity, well, I'm almost done, but the people that are going to benefit the most from congestion pricing are the wealthy Manhattan residents, like the prior speaker, who will be able to extract more benefits from the city at the cost of poor people and working class who have to commute by car.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Corey Hannigan, followed by Raphael Wakefield.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, good morning. Thank you for the board for organizing these public hearings. My name is Corey Hannigan. I'm a New Jersey native, and I'm also a city and regional planning master's student at Rutgers in New Brunswick. And I'm consulting for the NJDOT within the Voorhees Transportation Center. I'd like to voice my enthusiastic support for this proposal. The recent storms and flooding show that we can no longer ignore the devastating effects of climate change. Things will only get worse until we take decarbonization seriously. And that means making tough choices like switching from cars to more space efficient and environmentally sustainable modes like trains and buses. You know, many people drive because transit's unreliable, and I understand that. But it's impossible to improve bus service when the roads are filled to the brim with personal cars and rideshare. We cannot continue to assume driving as a default. People make choices on how to get around based on the infrastructure available to them. And changing the balance of incentives could encourage many more people to consider alternative modes, alternative times, or even work remotely. Private vehicles account for less than a quarter of the total bridge crossings into Manhattan every day, but they consume the vast majority of street space and transportation funding, both in New Jersey and in New York. They are also responsible for the overwhelming majority of transportation-related deaths, and they are major sources of local air pollutants like ground level ozone and fine particulate matter, which are responsible for 95% of all air pollution-related deaths. These pollutants impact lung and brain function on the day of exposure and developmentally. So that includes everyone working in Manhattan that drove in, surrounded by gas-powered cars. But it also includes a large and growing number of New Jerseyans in New Jersey City and in Newark and other cities sliced through by our highway network. You know, the census showed a growth of 80,000 people in Jersey City and Newark alone. And these are new families that have children that breathe the exhaust of cars every day we drive past. Workers who drive into Manhattan earn significantly more than those who take the train, especially those they drive past. They're also more likely to be white, and poor residents are less likely to own a car. And overwhelmingly, the people who live near highways are low income and people of color. This has been implemented in Singapore, Amsterdam,
Please conclude
London.
your remarks.
It's a benefit for everyone. I urge you to consider the benefits of cleaner air for all of us.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Raphael Wakefield, followed by Lauren Paterno. Raphael Wakefield. We're going to move forward to Lauren Paterno, followed by Diana Bainberg.
Oh, shit.
Raphael? We can come back to Raphael Wakefield. Our next speaker is Lauren Paterno, followed by Diana Feinberg.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Paterno. I'm speaking on behalf of AAA Clubs of New Jersey, which serves approximately 2 million members across the state of New Jersey. First, we are grateful to the MTA for providing hearings across the regions, which will be impacted by the Central Business District Tolling Program. This is certainly a step in the right direction to ensure the public has an opportunity to be heard. The MTA currently charges different rates to drivers based on whether their Easy Pass was issued by a New York Customer Service Center or some other agency. The out-of-state Easy Pass rate is more than 50% higher than the New York Easy Pass rate. In our opinion, this practice is unfair and takes advantage of unsuspecting interstate drivers. For example, driving one way on the Henry Hudson Bridge costs $7.50 for an out-of-state Easy Pass user, $4.50 more than the New York Easy Pass user pays. This disparity is far higher than most other agencies. We believe the MTA should not charge differential rates to Easy Pass users in the Central Business Tolling Program. Additionally, in the interest of fairness and to eliminate the practice dubbed as bridge and tunnel shopping, any program implemented should equalize tolls for all entrants to the pricing zone, and drivers coming into the zone via the George Washington Bridge should not be subject to a double toll. Lastly, we respectfully request an exemption for service vehicles. Emergency vehicles, tow trucks, and light-duty service vehicles all provide essential safety functions in New York City. In fact, in London, all vehicles classified as recovery vehicles are eligible for a 100% discount because those vehicles facilitate flow of traffic by aiding and removing disabled vehicles. New York City should follow the London model for all service and recovery vehicles. We thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Diana Feinberg, followed by Jana Chernitz.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Diana Feinberg. I'm a professional planner in New Jersey, engaged for many years in development and transportation issues. I'm in the North Jersey area. I'm also speaking as a member of the Middlelands Chamber and the Fair Congestion Pricing Alliance. I have to say I've been dismayed so far by the lack of engagement with New Jersey during the formulation of the congestion pricing program framework. New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are all part of a connected regional economy linked by our transportation systems, the labor force, and many economic ties. New Jersey is also New York's largest commuter shed and growing commuter shed. The same people the city wants to lure back to revive its office economy, not to mention supporting its cultural institutions and retail businesses. However, unlike the Metro North and LIRR regions, New Jersey has no seat on the Transportation Mobility Review Board, which will shape the program. Neither will New Jersey, under the current plan, receive any revenue from congestion pricing. This ignores the role that New Jersey and specifically New Jersey Transit play in the regional economy and specifically the New York City economy. So what I would like to ask is that New Jersey be assigned a seat on the TMRB and be a full partner in evaluating and structuring the program. In addition, the environmental assessment should address the full range of potential social, economic, and infrastructure impacts on New Jersey. I understand the focus on the CBD, but there are also impacts to be examined on this side of the river, including impacts on transit and traffic circulation and congestion, and where the burden of tolls will fall on New Jersey's population.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jana Chernitz, followed by Zoe Baldwin.
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hi, good morning. I am Jana Chernitz. I'm the Deputy Director of the Tri-State Transportation Campaign. We appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment today in support of congestion pricing. Tri-State is a 501c3 nonprofit advocacy organization dedicated to mobility, accessibility, equity, and livability in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. Long championed by environmental justice and transportation advocates, New York City's congestion pricing plan is an example of a targeted approach to reducing traffic congestion, enhancing the availability and reliability of public transportation, improving local air quality. Congestion pricing revenue will be used to accomplish the goals of providing modernized subway signals, making the system almost fully accessible, improving bus service, and bringing Metro North trains to Penn Station. In fact, New Jersey transit commuters, many of whom transfer to MTA buses and subways upon reaching the CBD, will also reap huge benefits in the improvements funded through congestion pricing. In a recent analysis, Tri-State found that the impact on New Jersey drivers is minimal, as a nominal amount of New Jersey residents actually drive into the CBD for work. In all legislative districts surveyed, only single-digit percentages of residents work in the CBD and commute by private vehicle. Across all districts, an average of 1.6% of workers will be subject to the congestion charge. Public transit is the primary mode of choice of the majority of Manhattan CBD workers in every district that was analyzed. On average, 77.5% of Manhattan CBD workers who use public transportation to CBD from New Jersey. The majority of districts' public transportation commuters have a lower median income than commuters who drive into Manhattan's CBD. Given the effect of COVID on work and commuting patterns, and more people are working from home, and thus the impact on driving commuters from New Jersey is lower than the census data in our analysis shows. Tri-State has been fighting for congestion pricing for well over a decade, and now is finally within reach. We cannot afford to delay any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Zoe Baldwin, followed by Raymond Wynn. Zoe
Hello?
Baldwin. Yes, hi.
Hi. Good morning. My name is Zoe Baldwin, and I'm the New Jersey Director for the Regional Plan Association, a nearly 100-year-old civic organization working toward better mobility, economic opportunity, and a more resilient metropolitan region. For decades, we have strongly supported congestion pricing because we see it as a centerpiece of a set of policies that will lead to a greener, more equitable region. However, many in New Jersey have expressed valid concerns about how this will impact drivers and communities on this side of the Hudson. As a lifelong New Jersey resident, I fully understand those concerns and am here today to reiterate that congestion pricing benefits New Jerseyans a great deal. While New Jersey drivers have always paid tolls to cross the Hudson River, many from New York and Connecticut have avoided this by crossing at free city-owned crossings such as the Brooklyn Bridge. But with toll credits in place at all 3 New Jersey crossings, this new policy would level that playing field. 4 out of 5 New Jersey commuters already use transit to cross the Hudson River, and congestion pricing will reduce the traffic for that small percentage that do need to drive into the central business district. Our estimates show that this program will decrease traffic by about 15% during busy periods, which is good for our commutes, our commerce, and our air quality. Additionally, congestion pricing will improve the city's public transportation system, which is used by a vast majority of New Jersey commuters once they cross the river, further facilitating a smooth ride to work. In 2019, RPA produced a report that laid out recommendations for implementation and is available on our website at rpa.org. 2 of the key recommendations focused on the need for MTA to provide toll credits to drivers at the 3 Hudson River crossings and to vary that fee by the level of congestion at different times of the day. These recommendations will eliminate unwanted traffic shifts caused by drivers shopping for cheapest tolls and will incentivize off-peak travel, further reducing congestion across the region. MTA should incorporate these recommendations and also analyze localized traffic impacts in New Jersey neighborhoods. The bottom line is that congestion pricing is a big win for the entire region, and we strongly urge the MTA to consider the impacts it will have on both sides of the Hudson River and implement it fairly and equitably. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Raymond Wynn, followed by Steve Corellis.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Raymond Wynn. I'm a New Jersey resident, currently residing in Newark, and a student of the New Jersey Institute of Technology, majoring in industrial engineering, with also private interests in urban planning and transit-related issues. Having come into the city many times by both car and by transit, and having studied the matter, I would like to express my support for the proposal, and I would consider that it's a long time in coming. The externalities which are imposed by motor vehicles are generally not captured and are increasingly not captured as inflation has cut away at the gas tax and vehicles have become more fuel efficient. While New York City, of course, does not dictate national policy, it can at least relieve itself from some of the externalities that have been imposed in its own area, including imposing long commutes on those who actually do need private vehicles, as well as potentially shaping longer traffic patterns. Therefore, I would like to say that I am supportive of the measure to introduce congestion pricing into the central business district. That is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve Corellis, followed by Ron Simoncini.
I'm here.
Hi, we can hear you.
There we go. This is what the screen presents to you. There we go. I'm Steve Corellis, the Director of Government and Public Affairs for the New Jersey chapter of the National Motorist Association, a motorist advocacy organization. I've led the state chapter for close to 35 years, and during that time have commented on just about all toll matters impacting New Jersey motorists. On that note, the NMA joins with New Jersey federal, state, and local officials to ensure that this tolling program credits tolls paid on all bridges and tunnels from New Jersey that provide access to the central business district. That includes the George Washington Bridge. On a broader note, this congestion pricing tolling program, also known as a legalized money grab from motorists, should note the following 4 things. First, don't convince yourselves that congestion pricing implementations in other countries will translate well to a program in the US, even in New York City. We should be more realistic about the problems that were experienced elsewhere. Second, the calculated costs of time and money of congestion to businesses, commuters, and residents are some of the supposed justifications for the program. However, those costs fail to take into account that they are preferred by motorists for the broader benefits that driving or sharing a vehicle provides over public transit. That has its own problems and contributions to lost time and money. Question, what if congestion doesn't improve? Will tolls be raised further until it does? And since motorists are paying a new cost for supposed better service, what are you going to do in conjunction with New York City DOT to improve congestion beyond anticipated price gouging? Fourth, how are you going to handle toll collection problems that aren't the fault of motorists? The state of New York has a poor track record in that regard. In closing, be very careful. Motorists won't tolerate being a cash cow if they don't see value and fairness.
Please conclude your remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ron Simoncini, followed by Michael Goals.
Thank you for your time today. I just got heard that somebody from RPA said that people in New Jersey were diverting to the Brooklyn Bridge for their commute. And that's all you need to know about the credibility of RPA. That's absolutely ridiculous. What's really happening here is that New York wants to preserve a $6 commute for residents of New York City on their subways and buses. And they expect New Jerseyans to pay $45 a day to commute. So you talked about environmental justice, but what about the economic justice? What about the social justice of the situation where a sitting duck in New Jersey is supposed to say, I'm not going to change my commutation pattern. I'll pay $40 a day to commute, or I'll go on already full and at maximum capacity buses and trains from New Jersey. That's just not going to happen that way. And you guys know it's not going to happen that way. So this whole process is dishonest. The fact of the matter is you need $15 billion to fix your stuff because you haven't maintained it. And now you want New Jerseyans to pay it in the cost of their commute. But you know what we're going to do instead? We're going to do what we've been doing during the pandemic. We're going to stay in New Jersey. So in order for New York to have a recovery that's broad, that's inclusive, you can't have congestion pricing because you're going to discourage people from coming in and doing the things that New York needs, which is bringing economic activity back to the city. So we need to look no further than the fact that the agency determining the tolls is Bridge and Tunnel. You don't have a seat at the table for NJ Transit. You don't have a seat at the table for Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And the incredible moment is it's Port Authority's bridges and tunnels that are bringing these riders in, and you don't have them on your board. This whole thing's ridiculous. Everybody's been saying, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I'll give one more take on that. I don't appreciate the opportunity to talk. I resent the fact that we're having to spend resources to contest this ridiculous program.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Goals, followed by Audrey Kaminsky. Michael Goals. We will come back to Michael. Our next speaker is Audrey Kaminsky, followed by Kara Girl. Audrey Kaminsky.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
I'm not sure why the camera's not coming on. I apologize for that. Oh, here I am. Sorry. Okay, here I am. Sorry. Okay. So I'm actually a member of the two of the demographics impacted. I am a resident of Southern Manhattan, south of 60th, more precise, of Southern Battery Park City. I also work in Morristown, New Jersey. So I would like to address many aspects, but I'm going to focus on the impact of my neighborhood. I've come to many of these meetings and have heard hardly anyone address this. Southern Battery Park City is a unique neighborhood. We are roughly 1/2 mile long and 2 blocks wide. We are cut off from the rest of Manhattan by West Side Highway. So I understand West Side Highway is not going to have a toll. So does that mean we can go on West Side Highway and joyride around the perimeter of Manhattan, but we cannot enter the rest of Manhattan? So a resident in Bidai, which is 2 blocks from me, can drive all the way to 59th and back, no penalty, because it's our understanding that if you stay within the grid, you're not penalized. But those in Battery Park City cannot access the rest of Manhattan. You may say, well, why do we need to? We can take subway. The closest subway here is 1/2 mile, and that's just a couple lines. The other ones are further. So if you're elderly, unfortunately, I'm mobile, but a lot of elderly residents cannot. They have to take cabs or drive themselves. Cabs are already having the congested pricing in their tolls. So we need more information about how this is going to impact. You're talking about like this whole thing in Manhattan as if it's unified. Our little area is unique, and we need more information. The lack of transparency is really troubling. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kara Girl, followed by Raphael Wakefield.
Good morning. I'm Kara Girl, Research and Communications Associate at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. I'm also speaking as someone who can't drive, but has friends and family in New Jersey. I frequently take the PATH and New Jersey Transit to get there from Brooklyn, and while neither option is perfect, public transit gets me where I need to go. I know that congestion pricing will only speed up my and so many others' trips to Jersey by reducing traffic and funding critical transit improvements to get us to and from the path and NJT. The argument that transit doesn't get you anywhere in, out of, or to New Jersey doesn't ring true. Instead of trying to stop congestion pricing from happening, elected officials west of the Hudson might consider investing that same energy in improving their own transit systems. Transit riders need congestion pricing now more than ever. It's the only feasible way to substantially raise funding for the MTA without raising fares. It'll bring in a steady stream of money for key improvements to the region's transit and commuter rail far beyond the 5 boroughs. Facing COVID and worsening climate change, the additional billions of dollars from congestion pricing could not be more important for riders coming from Jersey and beyond. And for those who still choose to drive, it'll help speed up the trip. Particularly relevant this climate week, the environmental benefits of congestion pricing cannot be understated. As we learned from historic storms and flooding this summer, the MTA needs significant funding to build a more resilient regional transit system that can withstand the forces of extreme weather. Congestion pricing will bring the billions of dollars we need to repair our transit, while also improving air quality, decreasing traffic around the metropolitan area, and making the region less car dependent. Constant bumper to bumper traffic can be a thing of the past, improving quality of life and commutes all over the region. We deserve reliable and frequent service across our subways, buses, and commuter rail. And finally, thanks to congestion pricing, the 21st century transit system our 21st century region desperately needs is in sight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Raphael Wakefield, followed by Michael Goals.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. My name is Raphael Wakefield. I live in Jersey City. Thank you for giving me another chance to get connected. My message to the Federal Highway Administration is that this outreach is a waste of time and far too extensive. Stop wasting time and money soliciting complaints from cranks all the way to Pennsylvania. The duly elected New York State Legislature has passed this legislation. It should be enacted without delay. There should be no exemptions for anyone beyond what is mandated by federal law, except for taxis working in New York City. Today, the excessive traffic backs up through the Holland Tunnel and into Jersey City. The walking, riding, and biking public has taken enough abuse. As far as the objections raised regarding New Jersey specifically, these never get around to blaming the actual villain, which is the unaccountable, undemocratic Port Authority that prioritizes cars even as buses languish in the George Washington Bridge and the Lincoln Tunnel. The state of affairs is ridiculous. It's unacceptable. No other major city in the world, the developed world anyway, works this way for good reason. It's moronic. We deserve to have a life without constant honking and constant car congestion, and not cater to the tiny minority of people driving into and out of Manhattan. Thank you.
Thank you. Please note, if you are registered to speak and have not heard your name, please enter it into the Q&A chat now. Again, if you are a registered speaker, you pre-registered for this webinar and you have not heard your name, please include it in the Q&A chat box. Our next speaker is Michael Goals.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please speak up.
Yes, my name is Michael Goals. I'm a supporter of the Fair Congestion Pricing Alliance here in New Jersey. And one of my main concerns is that you cite on your website, the MTA, and we do support congestion pricing because we need cleaner streets, we need cleaner air and all that stuff. But what you do say on your website, you cite London, you cite Singapore, and you cite all the other cities that have successfully instituted congestion pricing. Yet those cities had already improved their public transit before instituting congestion pricing. So as I am a commuter, and I do commute frequently in and out of the city, I know that there are major problems with infrastructure, not only with New Jersey Transit, but with the MTA, with the buses, and with the subways and everything else. So until there's major upgrades to the system, I don't see how any congestion pricing fee, tax, scheme, whatever you want to call it, is going to help improve a system that's already failing on its own. You need to improve the system first to then shift the transit, the commuting people to public transit in order to free up the roads. And until you do that, I fear that this is a disaster waiting to happen. you're just going to clog up the roads even more. And New Jersey Transit does not have the capacity. So therefore, these tolls, if suggested, should also be shared with New Jersey, so New Jersey improve their public transit, and we can get congestion pricing to the goal that is what it's supposed to do. Right now, as it stands, New Jersey needs a seat at the table. The federal government needs to step in and oversee the process so every party involved is treated equitably. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. For those who did not do so already, we encourage you to take our short survey via the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. For details about upcoming webinars and how to sign up to speak at them, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or by calling the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. As a final reminder, in addition to the virtual public webinars, there are several other ways you can provide comments, ask questions, or make requests. We encourage the public to comment via the CBDTP website, new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. You may also email comments to cbdtp@mtabt.org. Send them via mail to CBD Tolling Program, 2 Broadway, 23rd floor, New York, New York, 10004, or call 646-252-7440. The time is currently 11:03 a.m., and this concludes our webinar. Thank you again for your participation.